All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's application information session for the Oakland Cares Nonprofit Grant Fund. For those of you who have joined us on previous webinars from Community Vision, a warm welcome back, and welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. My name is Sarah Schwid, and I'm an analyst in the consulting department at Community Vision, and I'll be supporting today's webinar behind the scenes. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that this presentation is being broadcast from occupied and unceded Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone territory. Community Vision recognizes that we have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of their land, which is particularly important to mention given that much of our work has to do with land transactions. We take this time to honor the land itself and the Ohlone people, past, present, as well as future generations. I'd also like to just do some brief housekeeping. I wanted to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded and a recording will be sent to everybody who registered following the presentation. We'll also send out any resources that we mentioned as well as the slide deck via email. And please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat at any time, and there will be time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to our presenters today. Jessica Townsend is a senior program analyst in the consulting department. And Saul Etlin is our director of the consulting department. All right, take it away, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning for this webinar. Hope it will be very informative to you. Today, here's our agenda. We're going to start with an introduction to who we are at Community Vision. We're going to do a review of the Oakland Cares Grant Program. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rapid Response TA component of this program. And then at the end, we're going to have some time to open it up for questions. Next slide, please. So this slide is an overview of Community Vision. We are a nonprofit in San Francisco with a satellite office in the Central Valley in Fresno and as well in Oakland. Our mission is to promote economic justice and alleviate poverty by increasing the financial resilience and sustainability of nonprofits and enterprises. And so we pursue this mission through 4 different programs. Our first program is a consulting program, and that's where Sarah and Saul and I sit. This program is about helping organizations to learn to use their resources, whether financial or real estate, to maximize their impact. The second program is our lending program, which offers flexible financing to nonprofits and social enterprises that are serving communities which lack access to capital and opportunities. Our third program is the policy program, which advocates for policies aligned with our mission. And finally, we have an investing program where we can serve as a conduit for individuals to make socially responsible investments into the community. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of the services that we offer in consulting. In general, whether we're helping an organization to figure out if they can afford higher rent, or we're doing an analysis of their historical financial performance, all of our services are about helping organizations to make strategic decisions to maximize their impact. Next slide, please. To give some context, this is a new program. We're just launching it afresh this year. The goal is to support Oakland-based nonprofits that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. We'll talk a little bit about eligible uses of the funds later on in the presentation, but the grant sizes will be up to $25,000. And this program is funded by the Federal CARES Act, and Community Vision is administering it on behalf of the City of Oakland. Next slide, please. In terms of eligibility, this is a list of the requirements that an organization must meet in order to be eligible for this program. You must be a 501c3 nonprofit or a fiscally sponsored project that is being sponsored by a 501c3 nonprofit. Your total annual budget and annual actual expenses must be less than $1 million. It's a bit cut off here, but for the most recent fiscal year, must be currently providing programs and services that address the impact of COVID-19 and the needs of low-income residents and businesses in Oakland. And this next one lists the areas in which you must be providing services to be eligible. So health and human services, economic and workforce development, legal support, food security, homeless and renter support services, and education. Your organization must be located in Oakland and have been in business in Oakland for at least the last 3 years. And in the application, you must provide a brief narrative overview of the programmatic needs or loss of the organization due to COVID-19 business interruption. And one note about this last point, we should have updated this as well. Organizations are ineligible to receive a grant if they have received a PPP loan in excess of $20,000. So if you have received a PPP or a Paycheck Protection Program loan that is less than $20,000, you are eligible. It's only if the loan that you received is $20,000 or more that your organization would be ineligible. Next slide, please. This slide lists a couple of additional eligibility requirements that we have. And so these are not hard requirements in the sense that if you don't meet them, you wouldn't be eligible, but preference will be given to organizations that can meet these. So nonprofit organizations that are located in and serving census tracts that are deemed eligible for the Federal Opportunity Zone program. We actually have a link in our FAQs where you can type in your address and discover whether or not your organization is located in an opportunity zone, if you're curious about that. And then also nonprofit organizations that can demonstrate deep community roots and are trusted community partners that holds confidence within the communities that you're serving, and that you based your work and on the stated needs and wants of the community that you serve. And there is most of the application is meant to be very simple and straightforward with mostly yes and no questions, but there are some free response questions that give you the opportunity to speak to your programs that the programs that you provide and also the community that you serve. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Saul to talk about eligible use of funds.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So, you know, the eligible use of funds is pretty straightforward here. Sorry, I forgot to start my video. The eligible use of funds, so expenses that are that the grantee was unable to afford. So this is loss of revenue or new expenses that are related to COVID, or expenses directly to providing COVID-related programming. So if you pivoted to some new service to respond to food insecurity, health, rental assistance, those are eligible as well. Like many grants, the ineligible use of funds can't be used for 501c4 activities or lobbying activities that you do under your 501c3. Any legal settlements your organization is making, severance pay if you laid off staff and gave them a package. It isn't for new real estate activities, providing bonuses to leadership or anybody else in the organization. Any taxes that you might owe, or improvements to the property, even if they are COVID related, if you had to make adjustments to your space, but it does not cover any tenant improvement allowances. Next slide. So the documentation you want to pull together before you do the application, you'll need either 3 years of your 990 forms, or your financial statements. We got one question around fiscal sponsorship. If your program is under $1 million within a larger fiscal sponsor, you know, Tides or Community Initiatives or whoever, you're still eligible. You'll need to pull together 3 years of financials from your fiscal sponsor. So obviously those won't be audited, and they're not going to be 990s, but we do need 3 years of financials that show that you've been doing this program in Oakland for the last 3 years, and that have been at least under $1 million for the most previous year. So some kind of proof that your program is based in Oakland. So that's maybe a bill that your organization gets. Maybe you have an Oakland business license. Something that shows the program site where you're running program. So your year-to-date financials, those are obviously not audited. Like your 501c3 determination letter, or your fiscal sponsorship agreement. So you want to, if you are a fiscally sponsored project, you want to share that agreement, and then a copy of your organization's current budget. Next slide. If you want further, if we haven't answered all the questions here, and if you want further assistance or with the application, or you're starting to fill something out online and you want further clarification, you can set up a time. You can either send a question to the email that Sarah put in the chat, the Oakland Cares at Community Vision. You can also book a time directly with somebody on our team through these Calendly links. It's pretty easy to find a slot that works for you. And it's available both in English and in Spanish. Next slide. Part of this program is we're providing additional technical assistance. So if your organization could use some help just kind of looking at cash flow or your financials, or you want help answering a real estate question, we've been doing a lot of work lately with folks around their leases. You can book a longer session with us through the link. I think Sarah will probably pop it in here. We'll send out all these links afterwards too to everyone that's participated. And we can do a little deeper dive with any organizational challenges that you're facing related to COVID. I think Jessica mentioned at the top of the webinar, our real strengths is providing nonprofit support around real estate questions and financial management. And we can connect you to other resources as part of that call if we're not able to provide support. Next slide. So this application has a hard deadline of 5 o'clock. The application system will actually turn off at 5 o'clock. So I strongly encourage everyone to complete, to go in, get started, upload what you can, answer what you can. You can save your responses so you can come back and finish later. I do believe we made there is a download of all of the questions on the application page. So if you want to go through that, it's a pretty straightforward applications, quite a few yes, no's. There's not a lot of narrative involved. It's mostly the documents that these evidence documents around financials, and then there are some questions around the communities that you serve. But please don't try to fill this out in at 4 o'clock on October 14th, because you may run into an issue where you're halfway through the application and it shuts down. So it does actually turn off and not accept any submissions after 5 p.m. on October 14th. We will keep slots available to answer questions up till noon that day, although those could fill up. So if you do have, again, if you starting earlier, the better. And we hope to do a fairly quick turn on doing the eligibility review, an impact review, and have awards announced by November 2nd. And we anticipate there'll probably be a total of 35 or so awards made from this program. Next slide. I think that's it. I think we'll open it up to questions. We hope it's pretty self-explanatory and straightforward, but we know, as you're filling out things, always questions come up. But if there are any questions now, we'd be happy to take them. Or if you want to, you can go to the website, download the application, feel free to book a time or send a question via email. Jessica, is there anything I missed that we want to add?
I think that's pretty much it. Just wondering if anyone has any questions. Oh, there is one more thing I wanted to say. So on the previous slide where it was cut off about the budget amount, so your organization has to have a total annual budget and actual expenses of less than $1 million for your current and previous fiscal year. And so as Saul said, if you're fiscally sponsored, that's not for the entire organization, that's for you as the fiscally sponsored project, but it's for your current and previous fiscal year.
And I see Shay's question there. I think we're going to have to get back to you on that because I don't know the answer to this one. Unless, Jessica, do you recall if an organization with multiple sites? Great, I appreciate it. Organization with multiple sites, can they look at just their program site for Oakland, or is it the or would we be looking, since it's you know, ACC might ACE might be looking, you know, they're just curious, like, can they apply for just their Oakland program, even though they're a statewide organization? I think we have to get back. I think we have to touch base with the City of Oakland's team on this question and get back to you, Shay.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if we had a response about that because I think
Nope,
another organization has a similar question. So just checking.
In the chat, there's the question of if you had a larger budget over the you don't have to be under $3 million for the, or sorry, excuse me, under $1 million for the last 3 years. I believe we are just asking for your previous completed financial year is under $1 million. Not staying under 1 million for the full 3 years. Thanks for your question, Karen. This was a standalone grant that we're working with the City of Oakland. We're not familiar with the RFQ that you're referencing, so I'm pretty sure it's not related in any way. This is specifically a tranche of the CARES Act money that the City of Oakland received that they're directing towards non-arts nonprofits. They do have a separate program for arts and culture organizations, which an organization called CCI is currently running. So what we're looking for eligibility is what was your budget actuals for the your previous fiscal year, completed fiscal year. So if you have a large multi-year grant that was over $1 million, that if your organization's total revenue and expenses were over $1 million in the previous fiscal year, you would be ineligible. If it was under $1 million, you would be eligible. Sorry, I'm just seeing now that the question wasn't to all attendees as well, but hopefully that was clear for everyone. Any final questions before we wrap up here? And again, please feel free to reach out to us with questions once you look through the application questions. We're happy to continue to give guidance. Thanks, Laura. So yes, For the eligibility requirement is that your previous fully completed fiscal year, that your total revenue and expenses were under $1 million last fiscal year, not current budget. Is that right, Jessica?
I believe the guidelines say that you have to have an annual budget and actual expenses of less than $1 million for the applicant's current and previous fiscal year.
Okay, sorry.
But I think it might, if you had $1 million grant that is multi-year, if
Right.
within your budget you're recognizing that grant over the course of however long the term of that grant is, it wouldn't be your budget shouldn't show revenue of $1 million in this past year. It should only show the revenue that you intended to spend in that year. So it shouldn't I'm hoping, that it was only like, if it was a 3-year grant with $1 million, then that revenue for year one would only be like $333,000 rather than $1 million.
In the Q&A, Adriana asked if we could provide more context around defining what education is. Our organization, Brown Girls Surf, includes environmental education and ocean conservation in our program. We didn't get a lot of guidance from the federal government on what education is. It's just a large bucket called education. So if you are providing learning experiences for young people, that's would likely qualify as education. I don't think it's it doesn't have to be as tight as like a charter school or something that's a more formal education. All right, any last questions before we wrap up?
We cannot hear you speaking, Laura.
Laura, I will give you the ability to speak. 1 second here.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, my voice is so squeaky. So my question is we do have the multi-year grant. It is $3 million over 3.5 years. Our first year, we didn't receive the grant until late into last year. And I'm wondering if, so we received the actual funds in October for August through the next installment of our, when we spend down the 1 million. So I'm not explaining this very well. I'm just wondering if, since we received the 1 million already for, it's not really on a fiscal year calendar or a fiscal year time. They gave us the first installment, which was $1 million. They gave it to us in October of last year. And so when that gets spent down, then we can apply for the next. So does that qualify as being, you're saying the fiscal year or the budget year? You see what I mean? That's a little tricky.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So what you're saying is they gave you $1 million, but there's not necessarily a time frame that they're giving you to spend it down. So you're going to spend it down as you sort of need to. Is that the case?
Right. So once you get down to 80%, then you can reapply. And
Okay.
since our actual program started in August, and we were able to to get some back funding like salaries and supplies, but programmatically, we did not start delivering services until December. So again, it's tricky.
And do you plan, so what is your plan to spend down those grant funds? Are you
So
planning?
we've been delivering services since then, and I think we're getting close. I think we have like 3 months left of funds for program, as well as for on this particular $1 million. We have I think like 3 months worth of funding left, and then we're requesting the next million.
Okay, so then that'll mean that within 3 months' time, you'll have spent $1 million just from this grant alone.
Right.
Okay.
To complicate things even more, they're doing budget modifications review as well, request and review, as well as they're reviewing all of they're doing desk review of everyone's last 3 invoices. So while we might request, and we can't request the funds until that's all approved. So again, we can have spent down that money, and we're being very conscientious about that right now in order to make this last. But it's a state grant, so it's possible it could take 4 to 5 months for their procedures. They've told us they want to expedite us, however. That's the reality, given how, things are in the state right now.
So Laura, what what does your organization consider its fiscal year? The calendar year, or
The calendar, yes.
and you write a budget to that same fiscal year?
Well, here's the thing. We are a 3-person nonprofit. We were grassroots until I came on last year and moved us into the realm of a real for real organization. Woohoo! And so I set us up for calendar year.
Yep.
And one of the other questions I was going to have is, but yes, let's say calendar year. We're on a calendar year.
Okay. And I think, what we would like to see you submit, if possible, is, your actuals for the prior calendar year, whatever those were, sounding like it was pretty small at that time, and then
Right.
your FY20 budget, whatever that is. And so that's really the FY20 budget, because we're here on the 3rd quarter of that. That's really that's the budget we'd be looking at for eligibility under $1 million. So how you're taking that grant, how recognizing that grant, as Jessica pointed out, assuming you're not recognizing it all over FY20, you probably are okay, but you'll have to take a look at your budget, and then whatever your actuals were for FY19, that if you upload that, it sounds like that won't really be a challenge there. So it sounds like you're likely okay, but after you look at your budget, if you have further questions, feel free to set up a time with us.
Okay. And then my last question is we don't have audited financials.
That's okay.
Okay, great. And other than that, I think we're going to be fine.
Great.
All right.
One of the things one of my colleagues who's watching wanted us to point out is, because this is federal money, there are several policies that are supposed to be in place in most organizations. This comes out of a Sarbanes-Oxley. This is like leftover from 2008.
Right.
2008. So when you run into that on the website, whistleblower policy, equal employment opportunity policy, records retention policy, you'll see a series of those questions. If you do not have those in place, we have sample forms available for you to be able to use to build them out. So hopefully you'll be able to put those together. So take a look at those questions, and feel free to reach out with us. I think we're working on linking the samples onto our website, but in the meantime, just reach out to us and we can send you the samples if you don't currently have them. On the application, you're just certifying that you have them. You don't have to provide them as part of the upload. So Thank you, Ernesto, for calling that out. Okay. Unless there's any last questions here before we break, we appreciate everybody taking the time this morning to learn more about the program, and looking forward to seeing applications from those that are eligible. And again, totally available to answer. We have multiple channels where you can answer questions as you work your way through the application. Hopefully it's not super onerous. That was one of the goals as we built it. And we thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for coming.